501. First item on the agenda is approval of December's minutes.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, policy work.
All right, as I'm getting this booted up here, the first thing I would like to do is draw your attention to the summary chart, which I'll have up here in a minute. This one looks like this. So it is our master tracking document, and what it allows us to do is to figure out how we get from what we have now to a more ideal board governance structure. That's the appropriate way to frame all of that. So one of the things that we had to do was we had to make sure that everything had a home in the new structure. So maybe just by way of a reminder, so we went to IASB, we went to their policy primer. It carries policies 100 through 900. So we are using that as our baseline. It does not have those multiple other categories that we have. So whether that's board governance or superintendent board linkage or a separate policy for participation at board meetings, those are all subsumed in their 100 to 900 policy. So Kim and I went through multiple times, and everything that, I don't know why it's not responding, I'll work on getting that up though. So you can see that there are things that are housed in multiple locations. All right, should use that to try. So for instance, if you look at board governance level 1, you find that in 201, 2, and 3, which we're going to take a look at tonight. If you are looking at, for instance, participation at public meetings, that's in board policy 213. You can see all the appendices are also referenced. Oops, with a typo. So appendix 5, you find in 501.5 and 801.3. So every place that we found something that looked like what we had, we have a reference in there so you can crosswalk that. I will say, perhaps interestingly, that many of our items are found in multiple locations, which might have caused some of the confusion that people had when they were looking for things. Because I think what happened was frequently if they were looking for something, they found it and then didn't keep looking, and you can see that a lot of these are located in multiple locations. If you see an arrow in there, for instance, if I'm looking at level 2H, 3H on superintendent directions, and you see 802.1, that means 802.1 through 4, so it's 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4. So some of them are long. Board governance level 2G is 210.1 through 210.10. So I tried to shorten that up a little bit so it's a little easier to see. So that's our summary document. That's what we're working through. When you go back up to the top, you see two things. You see legally mandated board policies and administrative guidelines. Again, just as a history refresher for you, back in 2011, the board said we would like to only have legally mandated policies. So our counsel at the time went through state statutes and said these are the only policies you are required to have. And so they stripped out everything else. Everything else became part of our administrative guidelines. So we tried to preserve as much of what we had prior to that edict as we could. And so now as we're going through, we're simply folding those back together. So the legally mandated 100s and the admin guideline 100s look pretty much the same as what IASB has in their 100 series. And so now you see them folded back together, which hopefully makes it a little bit easier for everybody to find things. So that's the general overview on the policy process. Are there any questions I can answer about how we did it? Okay. You have in front of you right now on the board docs 3 sets of policies, the 100s, the 200s, and the 900s. And let me get mine up here. There we go. So the 100 series, and I know, by the way, it can look awfully daunting when you're looking at it electronically. When you look at it in print, it looks like this. give you an idea in terms of size, and recognize that a lot of those pages are only partially full, and a lot of them are forms, so you see that in there. Rather than reading through all these, I thought I would just stop and ask from a process standpoint how you would like to work through each of these, and if you have specific questions about any of them before we go too much further.
I think we just start with hundreds and.
All right? All right?
I know I read through them and I don't know, I assume you guys at least took a look at it. And I think the way it's set up with the, kind of the front page being your, table of contents, if you will, I think I would just assume pick out one that, if you got a question about one, go to it. I'm not, in full disclosure, I'm not going to be the wordsmith that's going to pick out individual words and tell you they need to change. I'm going to have more, this section seems a little weird to me, kind of thing. And I've only got a few of those questions.
So let me add, I forgot to give you a disclaimer on that. So IASB, one of the services that they provide to member districts is they monitor court decisions, they monitor Department of Ed rules changes, they monitor judicial rulings, and they monitor changes through the state legislature. And when necessary, they send out updates to these policies. So one of the charges to the people doing the reviewing is to start with the IASB language, and if there is a need to make a revision to that language, to think really hard about it, because then we're going to have to track that, because every time IASB updates the policy, we're going to have to make sure we localize it. So more often than not, and you don't really see it in the 100s, but, oh yeah, you do, sure, in 105. So if you look at it, 100, 101, 102, 102E1, 102R1, if you see those, that's all IASB provided. If you drop down to 105, you see 105G1 and G2. Anything that's a G is a guideline, and that is specific to Iowa City. That is not part of the framework that IASB provides to us. Thanks for pointing that out, Sean. I forgot about that. So that's why you might see some language in there. You say, hey, I don't recognize that from past iterations, and that would be because we've taken it directly from the IASB recommended policy. So anyone particular that leaped to your attention? And if not, I'm just going to kind of strafe through these real quickly.
So the miniature horses part?
Okay, that is actually federal.
Like that too,
That's a great catch there. That's a federal requirement. That comes to us through IDEA. The Americans with Disabilities Act specifically talks about service dogs and service miniature horses. So that is not actually our language. We received that directly from the federal government.
So how does things like, so in the 104, that's bullying, harassment?
Yep.
So then you have like the complaint form that are in there, are those used in the past? Or
Yep, that's a great question. So one of the things that we are working on right now, one of the things that you'll see in there is delineation about who does what. So when you look at things like bullying and harassment, you'll see references to Laura Cottrell when it comes to students. You see references to Jeremy Tabor when it comes to employees. And so if you think about kids and adults, that's kind of the breakdown for who does investigations and determinations for those things. In the past, we've had competing forms. This now gives us one form. However, this form is the IASB form. We're going to take another look at it and compare it with our form just to ensure that there's nothing that's missing on here. There are a couple other places, and you'll see it when we get to the, is it 700s and 800s with rental?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 900. When you get to 900 with the rental, you'll see that we substituted our own form for it. So we may wind up pulling E1 and substituting it with a G1, which would be our form, if we decide that this form doesn't capture everything that we want it to. So there have been a couple read-throughs on it. The first couple that looked at it said it appears to capture everything that we have on our form. It's formatted a little bit differently, but it appears to be materially the same. But we're going to do another read-through on it because we've done the read-through as it pertains to the employee lens. We want to look at it from the student lens now and make sure that there's nothing missing on
So since I'm on that one, I didn't, and maybe I missed it, but I didn't see any mention of the bullying and harassment, the filing a complaint, of making the anonymous complaint on the tip line that we have now.
Ooh,
Oh, that's great.
that is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have, I wonder if we need to put that in from a standpoint of better defining it in a guideline connected to it.
Probably both that, and we could put a separate sheet for the say something hashtag.
Yeah, I think what we'll do,
Yeah.
thanks for that catch, what we'll do is we'll probably, I would agree with Kim, I think we'll need a separate guideline on that, and then probably the form for that, because we've got a screenshot of what that form looks like. We can add that as a guideline. Any other specific policies that catch your attention? Like I said, if not, I'm going to go through these relatively quickly for you, and you could stop me as we're moving through it.
No.
I'm still trying to, I wrote down a couple notes, but of course I didn't write down the numbers to remember where they belong. I think my questions were not in the 100s.
Okay.
So skip through really fast.
All right. So legal status 100 is pretty straightforward. Educational philosophy of the district, that was already in place for us. So both of those are crosswalks from before. Equal educational opportunity. And again, localized here, you see Laura and Jeremy's name there. Annual notice of non-discrimination. Again, this is the same process that we used before. Continuous notice of non-discrimination. We have had several different iterations of this as a district. This is the standard one that's prescribed by the state, which recognizes federal designations for protected classes. 504, student and parental rights. Again, same process we used before. And then we just talked about the forms. So just like in 104 and 102, we're going to take another look at these forms and make sure there's nothing that's missing there. Grievance procedure, which is 102R1. And this, it's a little bit of a misnomer, but just as you think about it, this is a specific grievance for discrimination. So this is an employment issue. So we've looked through that from an HR lens. And I should tell you that if you think about this as kind of a narrative and you're trying to follow it through, that's not always the best way to do it, because they don't always flow from that standpoint. So now the next thing we step into is long-range needs assessments. Again, this mirrors policy we already had in place. And then you see R1, and those are the indicators that the district uses. And again, those are from past process. Talked about 104 and the forms that go with that. The harassment, anti-bullying harassment investigation procedures are the same processes we used before, so that's R1 on 104. Assistance animals, and again, we just talked about the miniature horse pieces, but the process that's in here is the same process that we used before. What you'll want to note is that we have 4 different animal policies in the district. 2 of them reside here, and these are service animals, which are G1, and you can see all the forms that go along with it. So that section for G1 is 11 pages long. This was developed, oh Matt, how long did this take? About 4 months? Maybe.
Felt like 12.
Developed in conjunction with legal counsel, so we can make sure that there is consistency. You'll note the framing and the format for 105G2 or therapy animals looks almost identical to service animals. There are some specific language changes in there that the legal counsel represented. Service animals are those that are required by law. Therapy animals, a district can choose to or not to allow them. So we've chosen to allow them, and then have a process in there that looks very similar to the service animal. And again, that includes everything from the forms to, you'll notice that there's sample letters in there that go to the student, go to staff, and then go out to other parents in that school so that they're aware of it and can go through the acclimation process. By the way, Matt, you've been a part of this, so if you see anything you want to chime in on, feel free to jump in.
I'm trying to look at the 105 versus the 105G.
Yes.
Kind of distinguishing between service animals and the therapy animals.
Yep. So probably the biggest distinction is if you look at G1 and you, let's see, where is it here? It's the second line on the definition. Individually trained to do work or perform tasks for the benefit of the individual with a disability, including to but not limited to impaired vision, impaired hearing, wheelchair, etc. So those definitions all come right out of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so again, the service animal one is prescribed to us at the federal and state level. If you then jump to page 1 of 105G2, you'll notice the definition is a lot shorter because again, this is one that doesn't come with ADA requirements. So in this case, it's to provide emotional support, comfort, therapy, companionship, or therapeutic benefits, or to promote emotional well-being. And it's specifically stated that it is not a service animal. So this would be an animal that someone requests to have for which they do not have a prescribed disability.
I just laughed at the last line. Can't be a wild animal.
No wild animal, no livestock. I don't know, just as an aside, I don't know how many of you have followed some of the challenges that airlines have dealt with service animals, but that was part of our conversation when working with the attorney. So airlines have had everything from
Somebody had a therapy
turkeys,
gator. You know that?
turkeys, squirrels, all
Peanuts.
kinds of stuff, yeah.
Where do pigs fall?
I think they're livestock. But I'm not sure about Vietnamese potbelly pigs,
Yeah.
which I was asked about, and I'm not sure that they fall under livestock.
Little mini pigs are awful cute.
Yeah.
Careful.
Okay.
However, if you decide you want to reopen the language on animals,
No.
they'll have to
Yeah,
answer
There
that.
might be an army of central office administrators.
We were redundant in our new policies with what was already stated in the main policy.
Yeah,
In some cases, it seemed like it was.
It is, there's some-
Reiterating it again.
and that's essentially, if you think about it going down a funnel, so when you see a 100, and then you see a 0.1, and then you see a G, an E, and R, so you're getting narrower on it, so that nests inside of that, so it's more specific than what's in there.
I'm not looking to review language on service.
And by the way, I'll give you the, I don't know, maybe bad news is the wrong word. The ones, the 2s and the 9s are the most straightforward. The next batch we're going to look at are the 7s and the 8s, also fairly straightforward. Then you're going to move into the 3s and 4s and the 5s and 6s, and I'll just go with how about less straightforward. Is that a better way to describe it? 3s and 4s are all the employee stuff, and 5s and 6s are all the curriculum instruction pieces. And actually, I should say it's less straightforward. There's just a lot more of it. There's a lot of stuff in there. Ready to move on to the 2s?
Any more questions about the ones? Move on.
All right. So the 2s, you're going to see a lot of correlation in here. And if you look back to this sheet here, a lot of the stuff, for whatever reason in our old process, we had separated and parked in lots of different places. Board governance, board superintendent linkage, the superintendent directions, your appendices, those are things that IASB has placed in 200. And so you'll see the main categories, the legal status of the board, the role of elections, members, some things in here that I know Director Hemingway was looking for: conflict of interest, code of ethics, liability, officers' roles, legal counsel, ad hoc committees, management procedures, meetings, open and close, public hearings, etc. So this is kind of who you are and how you run your meetings and how you do your job. So fairly straightforward from that standpoint. Do you have any questions on any specific policies here before we start going through them?
I think one of my questions is definitely one of our specific ones, because it's a G, and it's how we do our some of our subcommittees, right? Because we talked.
208G1?
I think there's some Gs, but I know we talked about, we had small subcommittees, and then the ed committee became a committee of the whole. We talked about doing other stuff within, at the board table instead of in subcommittees.
Yep.
The ops committee is the one that stands out to me just because I know we were more regularly doing it last year, and this year we sort of just stopped and always said, you know what, some of those things are more important just to bring to the table.
Yep.
And we're not having a regular committee, but
And
you have it
that's-
in here is.
It's
basically
200.3,
have one.
yep, G1, 2, 3, and 4. And what Kim and I did, just because they had a place in the old policy manual, we moved them over here. So right now, operations all takes place in the work session, and part of it was the discussion that the board as a whole benefited from it, and also because it seemed like you guys on ops went through it at ops and then came back and had to do it all again at the board meeting. So that's 203 G3. We left it in here simply because it existed in the old manual. So if you chose to pull that, we would just move P and G up to 203 G3 and we'd pull ops out. But again, we left that charter in there simply because it had been approved by the board at the time. So we thought we would just leave it in.
Well, we have discussed basically getting rid of it and doing it at work session or
Right.
at the table. And if we're currently looking at changing the dang thing, it seems like now's the time to take it out.
Yep, it is ideal. We just hadn't done it yet because we didn't want to take out something that was already in policy.
So then the other one I have, and I'm leery to bring it up, but I guess the question I have is, what did it say before and what does it say now? Because it very specifically says that when the board president resigns, the vice president becomes the president. And
And-
we did not do that.
Nope, and that one
I didn't
is,
know if we
To
went
the
against what was
6.1
written.
maybe?
or
Yeah, I
this
think
was
it's
new
0.1, isn't
language
it?
that came
or
from.
point 2.
I can't find it.
So this came to us, yep, that's a great observation.
We've already then passed the
Yeah.
next organizational meeting where we had another election, so it's kind of water under
Yeah.
the bridge, but I think it'd be important to know.
And I think you're looking at, yeah, it's 206.2, 206.1.2 are those the ones that you're looking at. So the way that they're written, and I think what you're looking at is the second sentence in 206.2. If the president is unable or unwilling to complete the term of office, the vice president will serve as president for the balance of the president's term of office, and a new vice president will be elected. I think that's the line you're looking at, right? That's literally directly from IASB.
So that was never ours.
That was never ours. That was just lifted directly from IASB and placed in there.
I'm glad that we didn't like totally go against what our language already was, but I think it's an important distinction to, that is different than what we have done, so it stood out to me, so.
Relatively easy fix from that standpoint as you see those, and that's literally just if the president is unable or unwilling, the board will vote for new officers. So if that's a change you want to make, again, that's very straightforward, easy to do.
I guess I'm not sure.
My preference would be that we would continue the way that we've done it in the past.
That is a very, like I said, straightforward change for us to make.
You have a preference?
I don't really, I guess, in order to, I would say most of the things, if we're just trying to move the language to whatever ISB has, right?
Right.
It's more like.
This is a
in
practice.
Words,
Yeah.
right, not so much substance, and this is a
Yep.
substantive
Yeah.
change, and
Yep.
I guess I would say if we had practice of how we were doing things in the past, and it worked for us, we
Yep.
should probably keep it.
Very straightforward.
I will agree with that.
All right, we will make that change.
Yeah, that's,
I mean, my only,
before your term, and when the previous president stepped down, that's the same way they had election.
yeah,
Yeah.
Right, to elect a new
Yep.
president and new vice president,
Yeah.
they just
Yep.
assumed.
which is fine. My only question is, I don't know if pulling out the operations piece without having the full board chime in.
I think you could make this suggestion, just like we are on this
Yep.
part, and
Mhm.
then that would be something you would vote on.
Sure.
Okay.
So
I think
our
when
policy suggestion is to pull this one
Yeah.
out, change the language in this one,
Yep.
and then you go back to them and say, what do you think? And then
Sounds good, we can do that.
We'll leave the ops one in there, just so it's a placeholder, and then when we get to the board table with all of them, we'll bring that one up.
saw that.
All right.
200 listed.
Well, 200.1, you guys could change the size of the board if you wanted to. Your very first one, 200.1. In Iowa, you can have a differing number of board members. 5 is another common number. So you guys could start a controversy.
We can go with 9.
Cedar Rapids only have 5? One of the bigger ones only has 5.
Cedar Rapids have 5? I think they have 7.
One of the bigger districts only
Yeah.
has 5, and it always boggles my mind.
Is it Sioux City?
Is it Des Moines?
Dubuque. Might be Dubuque.
Maybe only had 5.
Yeah, yeah. So first one, just how the board is organized, approved minutes, et cetera. Fairly straightforward there. Organizational meeting procedures, and you'll remember we went through, you're going to see this in a couple of them here. We went through the process of reframing our meetings. Was it when they came on the board or before?
Might have been
I'm on
before.
200.R1.
Before you go to,
Yeah.
on the organization,
Yep.
is this where, I know people talked during the last election process of districts,
Oh,
and would that kind of be where it would?
yep, and that, if you look at the very, very
crazy
first
like-
paragraph, it says board members are elected at large. So if you look at other districts in the state, they have, these are the multiple configurations. You either have board members elected at large, you have all director districts, or you have some districts that have some director districts and some at-large positions. So if that was a change you wanted to make, it would be literally right there in that third sentence.
Okay. I'm not advocating one way or another, I just know
Yep.
there's quite a few people that had kind of talked about it, or it was more like, oh, you guys don't do that?
Yeah, so I'll just share with you, this is an interesting dilemma. So one of the things that having director districts does, and I've worked in districts that has them, is it ensures there's a voice from all 4 corners of the district. But I've also worked in districts where you have 1 or more districts that are hard to get people to run for. I've seen write-in candidates win because on the day of the election, there's no one declared for that particular district, which makes it problematic. You've got very passionate people. You might have one district that has 2 or 3 really passionate people that care a lot about public ed and are running. And then you have one district where there are no candidates and someone's winning on a write-in because they got someone at the last minute to at least agree to be the write-in candidate. And sometimes it results in it's fine. Other times you wind up with disengaged board members, for lack of a better way to describe it. So it has its own set of challenges. I know some districts, like our city council here, actually runs this way, where they've got some director districts and some at large, so you get some balance with it. So. Organizational meeting, which is 200R1. This is a pretty straightforward process. Maybe one thing to note here, just as a reminder, it's that first sentence, hold the organizational meeting in odd-numbered years, the first regular meeting following the canvass of votes. There was a question that came up, do we have to make any changes to our organizational meeting because of the change to the election? We don't, because it specifies after the canvass of votes. So if the state wants to move our elections again, we'll still hold our organizational meeting. It'll just be dictated based on whenever that election is. You probably recognize this. It's a pretty straightforward process. What happens with the old board, then they retire. What happens with the new board, and walks right through that process for how we set up our agenda. This is the way we've used, or the way we've set up our agenda for years now. You look at the next few, there are some things in here that were either direct in other policies that we had, indirect in other policies that we had, or things that we didn't have in place. So the first one, power of the board, relatively straightforward, looks like what we've had before. Responsibilities of the board, looks fairly similar to what we've had before, including that review paragraph in the second one, or the last one rather. Then, as you pointed out, we've got our charters in here, so we've got 4 of them. So you see Ed and Ops and Policy and Governance and Finance, and those are the charters that were approved by those committees as part of that process. So we've got them all in there.
On the This was something that popped up to me, and I don't think it's a big deal, but on the Ed Committee, on the responsibilities, I know some of the stuff we're not really handling any committee, right? Like reviewing, well, maybe we will, but we have, reviewing recommendations from the curriculum review processes, right? That's not happening.
We've taken that to the board as a whole, and again, that was, when I got here, our committees were meeting sporadically. Some stuff went to committee, some stuff went to the board as a whole. I think we've decided over the past few years that a lot of the things that happen in the committee, the full board wants to know about and might prefer to participate in the discussion. And so, like you mentioned before with ops, we were repeating a lot of agenda items. And so what we did was we've gone through as a admin team, and if it's something that we know that is an interest for the board as a whole, we will choose not to place it on the Ed Committee, but we'll send it to the board as a whole, knowing that you want to have the opportunity to have that conversation about it. Perhaps take action at the table where it's visible and others can see it.
The Ed Committee is a committee of the whole, and it's.
And that's how Ed Committee became a committee of the whole. So it became a committee of the whole because everyone wanted to be on it, nobody wanted to miss the content. And so that's why when we had that conversation at the retreat about what our agendas could look like in the future, one of the suggestions I'd made was if you're trying to narrow the footprint and improve your board life balance, one thing is think about is moving Ed Committee items into a work session so that they're not standalone out there, because oftentimes we only have one or two. They don't last that long. Might be a better use of your time if you're driving in, driving home, to put those together under a work session because they are the board as a whole. Director elections in 201, you'll see our new nifty language about the first Monday in November of odd-numbered years. So that's our new state law. By the way, if you want some entertainment, you should talk to Travis Weipert, our auditor, about that. He's still struggling with how many ballots he's going to need to print because of the multi-jurisdictions. Qualifications, looks very similar to what we had before. That's 2021. 2022, hopefully that last paragraph sounds familiar to each of you. I haven't gone through that. It's exactly the same as what we used before. 2023, term of office. Again, this is reflects the changes in the law to the 4-year term. Duly noted the last sentence. Just a suggestion. Sean?
Yeah, just for tonight.
FPers, everything.
2024 is vacancies.
Question on that one.
Yeah.
So it says in there that if there's a vacancy, then the board can decide to do appointment, but the electors and the school district have the right to file a petition requiring.
Yes.
But it doesn't say, is there parameters around what that has to be, how many signatures, or does that?
Yeah, there's a state
law?
specification for it. So there isn't a number in here because that is actually based on the number of participants in the previous election. So you have to reach a threshold, so you can't actually put a specific number in here because.
201 says in accordance with law and policy.
Right, and so what we do
It's
is,
very generic.
we actually, in the past, when we've had to deal with this, we just call the auditor's office. They give us the number of electors, and then they tell us how many, so they actually calculate the percentage for us. So that's part of Travis's job, is to tell us how many we need. This is a new one, code number 203, page 1 and 2 there, Board of Directors Conflict of Interest. So we have not had this in the past. This entire policy is their language. I know this is something that Director Hemingway's been asking about. We've had some conversation about it. Actually, at this P&G table, you'll see this actually reflected now in 2 places. We won't be there just yet, but when we get to the 3s and 4s, you'll see it in the employee section too, almost verbatim to this one.
Yeah.
Yes. You'll see them in both. Code of Ethics, again, this comes right straight from the IASB. You'll also notice if you look at 204, that is, I think I made a note of it on my other sheet. So much of what's in your board norms is reflected in here. So. And I think some of these are things that individually and collectively the board's raised over time, and I think it's nice to see those things on paper.
This is ISB language.
We didn't change a word on here. Comes right from the. Hopefully they're all things that everyone agrees makes for a good board member.
Well, I think a lot of that stuff has come up over time, and we've discussed them on an individual line item basis.
Yep. (205), we did not have this in policy, although legally you would have been protected regardless of that. But I think it's good to specify it. So I know there have been questions that have arisen in the past when the board as a whole has been sued and those types of things. So while it's...
Why are we looking at the rule?
I'm looking at you two. But I think this just lays it out so that there aren't any questions. So I think as a board member, it's nice to know that you have the backing of the district as you go through those things, as long as you're acting in your role in good faith as a board member. The next few are roles. So we see the president's role in 206.1. Again, this looks a lot like what we had in ours. I'll maybe note one thing for you in here, which we've had conversations with Counsel about, because I know that you've received multiple newspaper clippings at your place at the table, at the board table, but board president, chief officer of the school district will sign employment contracts and sign other contracts and school district warrants approved by the board and appear on behalf of the school district corporation, et cetera, et cetera. Now, one of the things that happened in Waukee was there was some concern about who was and wasn't signing contracts, and we're still trying to get some clarification on whether the board president needs to sign each and every teacher contract. For us as a district, that's about 1,200 people. And there is provision in the law for using electronic signatures. There appears to be some conflict between this policy and the code requirement and the ability to use electronic signatures. So legal counsel is still going through that one, and if not, whoever is the lucky person who is the president on July 1st needs to do some wrist exercises because they might have 1,200 contracts to sign.
It will still be current president,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that I did check though, and they did say that there's a specific,
For electronic signatures.
Mhm.
Yeah, we've been trying to run that down. We think that they can continue to be the electronic signatures, which would be a real plus for us. Vice President, so we're going to take out that second line in that first paragraph and substitute it. We'll put some language in there about a special election being held. By the way, I think this question has come up. I forgot, sorry, if you go back to president, because I know this question has come up a couple of times. If you look at the third paragraph, before making or seconding a motion, the board president will turn over control of the meeting to either the vice president or other board member. So that issue has come up in the past, and I think actually, I don't know if we've had that question since Chris Lynch was on the board, but I know that was a question he asked on a couple of occasions, is can the board president make a motion? They can, but they have to step down for that moment from their role as president, ask the VP to chair the part where they ask if there's a motion, ask if there's a second, call for discussion, preside over discussion, call for the vote. So the president should not be making motions, and this just clarifies it for us, so there isn't any question. We didn't have that in policy before.
That just came up. In the last meeting or the meeting before that, Janet started making
Yeah.
a motion.
I think it was the meeting before that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Secretary and treasurer, the next two, 2063, 2064. This looks very similar to the roles that we have right now. So just as a reminder for you, right now Craig serves as the secretary and Leslie serves as the treasurer. There's a lot of flexibility in who can fulfill that role. Just out of curiosity, I ask our UEN peers, most of them have the kind of model that we have. And partially just because of the things that you have to do in between the meetings. And that way there's somebody who's here, well, I was going to say 24/7. I hope they're not here 24/7, but here, somebody who's here on a regular basis. Legal counsel. So this spells out your requirement for legal counsel, how you go about contacting them. I know that has not been an issue recently, but has been an issue in the past. So it's spelled out in here in terms of how that works.
Go back real quick to the secretary.
Yeah.
Washington. It has it in the secretary to keep complete minutes of regular board meetings, right? And, we have a board secretary.
And we delegate to a recording
But that sounds like
secretary.
a very specific
So,
task.
so the board secretary is required to validate the minutes, regardless of whether they actually take the minutes. So in our case, the recording secretary takes the minutes, transmits those, then they're approved and placed on the agenda. So he's fulfilling the letter of the law there. She's doing the work.
So it's
Sure.
good.
Yeah.
Take your report. That's the-
Hoc Committee.
This is the stuff we looked at.
Yep. So this is our ad hoc committee. So you've got three things here. The first two are IASB. So this is their, and we already went through this as a group. So this is their policy 208, their exhibit E1, and then our guidelines. I will tell you that in review of this, one of the proposals was we take that purpose and format out of bullets and actually turn that into a paragraph and leave the last two sections on membership and meetings in bullets, but actually turn the top set into a narrative so that it more fully follows the other framework for the other policies that are in here. So we're going to make that adjustment. And then look at 2091, just what you guys are doing.
I do have a question about that one.
Yes.
So the third paragraph,
Mm-hmm.
when it says board agenda, is that full like board or like our agenda?
I would think, based on the way we do it, that if, let's say, for instance, a kid at city decides that there's a new policy that they want in place, that they would request that that be placed on the agenda. We put it on a draft agenda, and then as part of agenda setting, as a board, you would determine whether that stays there, goes to P&G, or gets removed completely. And then we'd move forward with that way. So when I think about putting it on the agenda, because we always do our agenda setting well in advance, it would go on a draft agenda, and you'd see that as part of the agenda setting process. And keep in mind, we do that right now with grievances that parents file or requests for exception to a denial, say for an open enrollment or something like that. It goes on the draft agenda, and then you collectively, the board, decide, do we actually want to hear that, not hear that? So I look at this the same way.
It would, I assume, work the same way. We get a lot of people saying, hey, you guys totally need to do this thing, right? In community comment or whatever, board
Right.
table. And if it's something that, I'm like, you're right, we do need to do that.
Yep.
Is that the place to do it? To say, you know what, can we put that on an agenda?
Exactly,
Maybe
yep.
do this.
That's an ideal place to do it. Adoption of policies, we follow this process, and you'll remember that you'll see when we do agenda setting later, that's one of the reasons we picked the presentation, discussion, action model. So we actually have one more that would be required under this one. This says 2 regular board meetings. You'll actually get it for 3 because we'll present, then we'll discuss, then we'll act. But that gives us hopefully plenty of time for people and the interested members of the community to get a chance to take a look at it and provide input and feedback. And hopefully we don't find ourselves in a position in which we need emergency policies. And dissemination of the policy, that's ISB language. You may suspend in 2094. I can't think of a time in 26 years I've seen a board suspend
I was
policy.
gonna ask you what an example would be.
Never. The only thing I could really think of was maybe some kind of, I'm thinking the flood here in 208. Was there something that the board needed to say, we're not going to do that because of the flood? I would think it would have to be a natural disaster, the tornado in Marshalltown, something like that. So, I mean, I wonder if, like, in a place like Marshalltown, if they had some of the kids in school but not all of the kids. I really don't know. But like I said, in 26 years, I can't think of a time when a board was under such dire emergency that they felt they needed to suspend policy.
I can't remember who, it was. Somebody, when we were in Des Moines, at ISB conference, we were in the little shuttle going somewhere, and somebody from another district was talking about how they had made a decision to keep secondary kids in school and not elementary for something that had happened. And they had some special.
You know what, I wonder, that happens here occasionally, if we have something like a water main break or something like that. I wonder if it's a district that's small enough that they only have one elementary, one high school, and they sent the elementary kids home because that building was, they couldn't occupy it. Yeah.
I think it's a threat.
Oh, sure, yeah. Uh, 2095, I think our policies are pretty comprehensive. I actually was trying to think with the leadership team about something that would be of such immediacy that I would need to act without the guidance of a policy in place, without having the time to ask you what that should be. Again, I struggle to figure out when that's happened, at least in my career. I didn't have any examples I could come up with for you. Now, I do frequently draft policy and bring it to you for consideration, but that's something that usually has plenty of time in front of it. So for instance, your animal policies, usually plenty of time to process those. I kind of chuckled at 2096. Apparently I've been putting you guys on the fast track when I didn't need to. They say once every 5 years it needs to be reviewed. We're on a once every 3-year rotation. Maybe that's why we meet all the time. Sorry about that. But you can see their prescription here for how you do that. Our thought was once we get this on board, we'll just literally start with the 200 series as the next year and then roll through that.
You know, I actually don't mind the 3-year cycle versus the 5-year, because that means your time on the board for 4 years, if you're on there the whole time, you can get through all of the
Right.
policies of these ones.
So we can take that and.
Certainly.
make that as a change.
Yeah, even if it was 4.
Yep.
Well, 3 is fine.
Get it all in
I just,
Sure.
we did it.
Yeah.
too.
Yep.
I know I've only been on the board
If
3
you,
years.
if
but
you
I-
did it on a 4-year rotation, you would certainly get all of them during your term on the board.
Okay.
Tell you what, we can take a look at that and maybe recommend what you fold in together
Yeah.
on that. Oops. All right. 2097, admin regs. Now, one of the things that we did, which not everybody does, is so you've got the G's in here. So your admin regulations are inside our board policy, and we wanted to do that from a transparency standpoint so that people didn't have to wonder where to find stuff. So that's in here. So you're going to incorporate it when you do 2096, you're going to do 2097 because you're going to review those on a once every 4-year basis now. Annual meeting, because we love you guys and have you in every other week, we already incorporate that as part of one of our regular meetings. Regular meeting, second and fourth Tuesday. This is a fill in the blank thing, so in our case, that's why it says second and fourth Tuesday, 6 p.m. Special meetings. I can't think of when we've had special meetings when I've been here.
We've had-
Well, not where we've done it in less than 24-hour notice, but we have had,
We've had special meetings.
yeah.
Yeah, but we've had off-cycle meetings, but no,
Well, we did like, not like a full meeting, but we've had meetings with the, didn't we have a special meeting with the contracts?
Yeah.
oh,
There
yes,
are
we did.
special
We
meetings,
had to
yeah.
approve that. Yes, we did, thank you, forgot about that.
Or whatever.
Yep.
Yep. Work sessions, those are familiar to you. 210.4. 210.5, meeting notice, we actually exceed this one, which I think is a good idea. We get lots and lots of notice. You know, one of the questions that's come up is how soon, or how close to a board meeting you can make a change. So for us, it's 6 p.m. the night before, so we've had some board members that have asked about changing agendas day of, and that's not something that we can do because it's not been posted.
There's nothing on there that talks about, like adding or removing materials on a
Right.
line item.
Right.
At any certain time.
Exactly.
Which I
We-
think people have gotten that confused.
Yep, so you cannot change an agenda item by that, whatever the title is, you can't do that. If we need to upload or download documents, we can do that literally right up to the meeting. Our practice is to try to get everything on no less than a day in advance, preferably the week before. We really like to give you at least a minimum of Friday posting, so you've got the weekend to look through it, depending on what your schedule looks like. Quorum. I think you already know this, 4 members are a quorum. Rules of order.
There was one, it was a committee meeting or a works, there was something where people seemed concerned that there wasn't a quorum there.
We had an
I
ed
thought you
committee
only needed a
meeting.
quorum at a board meeting that you could potentially take action.
Yeah, I think there was an ed committee meeting at Borlaug, and we only had 3 people there to start with. And then Lori came, she had to leave early, somebody came late. And so we had 4 the whole time, no less than 4 the whole time, but for most of the meeting, we only had 4 people. Technically, if you don't have, and remember, the ed committee is a committee of the whole, but there isn't a requirement for you to have a quorum of 4 for a committee to meet because no action's being taken. I think that's our default, just from an open governance policy and practice, is to make sure that we try to conform to that and aren't meeting, especially a group like Ed Committee that used to be small and everyone said really needs to be a committee of the whole, that we don't meet without at least a majority of the board present. Rules of order. I told Kim she's got to break out her Robert's Rules of Order book. So way back when, that was a long time ago, Kim went to Robert's Rules of Order training because we were using that. I want to say that was 2011, 10, 11, something like that. And we went away from it. We had a couple people that didn't like it, and so we went away from it. It does give us some kind of rules of the road, though. So I said, if this goes through, I'm going to send her back to the refresher. It was up at the university, wasn't it?
Actually, it was online.
Oh, that's right, it was online. We looked at the university and then we went online with it. So she will wind up again being our parliamentarian and our expert on Robert's Rules of Order.
Not an expert, but.
I mean, we can leave that in there and see if anybody has strong opinions about it.
I'd say, as we started, it was the Liberty BSTO, right? They went and looked at bylaws and stuff for other groups. And Roberts is listed in a lot of places, and so somebody copied it over and like, all right, here's what we have for liberties. And a very astute member was like, does anybody know what that is? And nobody knew. They're like, you can't say that that's our way we're going to hold meetings if nobody knows what that is. And I kind of feel like we're in that boat a little bit.
Maybe what we do on this one is we bring it forward with a, do we want to go down this process? If we do, we'll get you some summary material on it.
I mean, I like the 7R1, the rules of order I mean, it's very prescriptive there and lists things out.
Those come right out of Robert's,
But
yeah.
you
This
can have
comes,
that without saying Roberts.
yeah, this actually comes right out of Robert's Rules. That I did go and look up while we were going through it.
That was number 2.
But, why?
And this has come up as an issue. All motions are made as a positive action, so you have to you can't make a motion not to do something, you can
I
only make
move to not
motions.
approve something.
Yeah, right.
It's illegal.
Right.
Well, not illegal.
And it's interesting, just by the way, because we also noted that as we went through here, that's in order to ensure clarity for the public, so that you are moving for something all the time. You're never moving against anything.
Right.
I think clarity for the board member who's sitting there, wait, do I say yay or nay? I can't,
Right.
am I double negative?
Am I voting yay on a nay or nay on a yay? Yeah. All right. Board meeting agenda, again, you're going to see when you get to E1, E2, remember, when was this, last fall we went through this? We go through this in the fall?
Just jump back.
Yeah,
to
sorry, go ahead.
210-7R1,
Yep,
number 8.
yes.
I guess,
So it says, "The president shall have complete authority to recognize a member of the audience regarding a request to participate in the board meeting, but," and it doesn't specify the number here, "members of the public who wish to participate shall follow board policy." There's actually a board policy, which is number 213. So there's already, we're going to see in a few pages, there's a specification on how you participate at board meetings. So while they can recognize them, they have to follow 213 in participating.
so they can't say, okay, you can come to the mic,
Right,
because they should have done a community comment.
correct. Like I said, 210-8, E1, E2, these should be familiar. We looked at these when we went to revise our meeting process. So hopefully that all looks very straightforward to you. Consent agenda. That's just the process that we use for putting items on consent. And this is their language. 21010 is the order of the regular Board of Directors meetings. 211 is just that emphasis on the fact that we hold our meetings in open and public. By the way, let me know if I'm getting ahead of you. Good. Closed sessions, and this just simply spells out what the law says about closed sessions. The thing I like about it is it's in our policy now, so if people want to know why you're in a closed session, they can look it up. Exempt sessions, and the second half of that. So obviously we have those in relation to negotiations, but again, it's clearly posted so people understand under what part of the law are you going into something that's not an open session, because that's not in our policy manual right now. We get questions about that from people who don't know open meetings laws, so it's nice to have that available to the general public. 213, so this goes back to your point earlier about how do you participate at a board meeting. So this spells it out. We have made some changes in here that are specific to Iowa City. So for instance, in the third paragraph, normally speakers will be limited to 4 minutes. That's a fill in the blank that we took out of our policy. You can see at the last paragraph there, Paul, only individuals recognized by the board president will be allowed to speak. That may be something that, I would say that we follow this, but we follow it sometimes by people calling other people, for instance, to a committee table. And it's not necessarily the board president who's doing that, but the committee chair usually affirms that. So that's been our practice.
What about, is there any reason, I don't think there is a purpose with that. So Craig and Les are doing something on a bond sale, and we've got a person from, I can't think of the company right there.
Yep,
Does that
PFM,
stuff for us.
yeah.
They just like, hey, come on up here and tell us what's going on.
So that person.
We need the board president to say.
That is, the difference with that is, so if PFM is here and Craig and Les give you the intro and then ask the PFM person to come up, the rep to come up and say their piece, they're actually part of the presentation. So the difference would be if somebody in the audience who's not part of Craig and Les's presentation disagrees with something that the PFM rep and starts waving their hand and wants to stand up and speak, that would be,
Or ask, can I say
yeah.
something? They have to be recognized by the board.
right. I understand that, I saw it on YouTube.
Where-
He said that happened at the last meeting, I said I was watching that on YouTube. Yeah. 213 specifies that. Then you'll see 213G1. The format's a little different, but essentially this is our policy. So we moved that directly over. So you can see all of our pieces are right on there.
Did we, in the 213G1,
Yes.
maybe it's just not written in policy, but did we ever have anything in here, maybe it's just our board thing, that kids speak first?
No, that's a good question. So it's never been a board policy that we let kids go first. We usually just simply ask whether or not there's any kids on the speaker list, and if so, then call them to the front. And so that really is just a board president's prerogative to allow kids to go first so they're not stuck waiting.
And then another one I think we talked about before, but maybe it just falls under the board president's role, but we allowed more time for speakers with translators, and then that 4 minutes.
Yeah, we've never had that codified.
It's actually right in here. Additional time may be granted for public speakers requiring services of an interpreter.
So, minutes.
Yeah.
I happen to be.
There you go.
when you're talking about that.
So that's not in ours. Wait, that is in ours. That's not in the other one.
Yeah.
It's
we
ours,
actually-
yeah.
in my
It's in the
time.
new,
All right. Public complaints. So this spells out a complaint process. This is one that was always hard to find. So we went through the process of pinning it to the top of the old board website so that people could find it. Public hearings. Those are inside of our board agendas. So for instance, at this upcoming Tuesday, there's 2 hearings in there, one on Liberty and one on Tate, I believe are the 2 that are in there. So we have our public hearings right inside there, and if you go back and look at the board agenda, you'll see that they've got the spot for them.
And if we go back one real quick.
Yeah.
Public complaints, we recently, the board got an email that also went to Lisa, and it had an attachment on there that was, here's this whole thing that we wanted, and I see the email, and my first gut instinct is, don't read that attachment, right? Because I'm in the wrong spot
Yeah.
to be looking at it, so I didn't. And then the whole email chain just kept going with more and more, and I was like, at what point did we really cross the line on how we were supposed to be doing it?
Well, the hard part about that is, first of all, it's a wonderful thing that as a board, you're accessible. I'll just give you a for instance. I've got friends that are superintendents in Alabama, and if you want to speak to the board in Alabama, you go to the superintendent's office a minimum of a month in advance, fill out a form, and then the superintendent decides whether or not you get to go on the agenda. It's a very different way, I think, of having a participatory democracy, in my opinion. But different states obviously do things differently. We have a very open process that allows people to directly address you, whether it's phone or email or text or however else they want to get a hold of you. I think the thing is that sometimes that makes it difficult for people who aren't in regular communication with you to understand where the boundaries are. We have a lot of parents that are sharing with you things that are FERPA protected information, which sometimes makes it difficult for staff to respond all because they don't have that same latitude to respond in detail about a child that somebody has mentioned in their email. So that makes the correspondence more difficult, and that's simply just parents not understanding what the implications are for us as school district employees. But I do think you do a good job of referring those to me or to members of the admin team, and then we go offline with you and have that correspondence directly with the parents. I know in the instance of the one you're referencing, there were additional emails that you didn't see that were, and unfortunately, the parents then incorporated some of those when they responded because they looped you back in, and if you were reading from the bottom up, you would have seen some gap communication where Lisa was communicating directly with them, and when they replied, they put board back in there, but you'd have had to read through the whole thing to see that. And that's a parent's prerogative, right? The parent always has the ability to share information about their own child. I would argue that's a bad place to do it because those obviously are all subject to open records requests. And we would have difficulty redacting that because of the way that they did the communication. But that opportunity is always there for them. So like I said, I think it's good that you have a very low threshold, low barrier to communication with them. I think the negatives are they're more easily offset than going the other way around.
I can just speak with personal practice. When I start to read emails like that and they get to that level, I will not read all of it and reply back and say, you need to talk to whoever, and this is, if your issue is not resolved, please contact me, and then just say it's not
Yeah.
mine.
And I think the other thing that this specifies, which we didn't have in the other one, it was implied in there, but that if you've got an issue with the teacher, please address the teacher first. Because part of the problem with that is if you go around this process, then if I'm a parent and I don't like something that happened at West where my kid goes to school, and if I don't talk to the teacher, if I go to Greg first, or if I go to Matt, or if I go further up the chain, that teacher then could complain that having not followed that protocol, that it's difficult for their principal or Matt to act as a judge in that case because their facts are prejudiced because they didn't start at the bottom, which we haven't had much of that, but I have seen instances in which if things get contentious, that can be really difficult, and then you often have to assign, which is difficult at the board level, but at an administrator level, you're assigning a different administrator to try to get to the bottom of something because they're independent and they haven't been associated with the complaint process so far. That's a little more difficult. They go straight to the board. It can be hard for you as a board then to hear that particular concern. I can tell you we've had some complaint processes in the past where board members have recused themselves from a final decision-making process because they'd been involved at the outset of the complaint. So your practice of saying, hey, I'm going to stop reading now and I'm going to ask, have you dealt with the teacher, have you dealt with the building administrator, have you dealt with the appropriate district person through that process, then puts you in a position where you can sit in judgment if that complaint were actually to come to the board table.
I would assume employees covers it, but what about athletic complaints?
Should follow the same thing. Yeah, they should, in this case, should be addressed to the employee would be the coach. They would be our employee.
And then from there-
You mean like good, like playing time or like good conduct violations, or what are you thinking about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
any of those. I think, you have the, just bring up an example for, you're splitting up teams and you have a person that you have on a certain level and you move them to a certain different level. And
Parent doesn't agree with that?
Complains, and the first
Right, so it
complaint
goes
is to the
employee
coach.
first, yeah, coach,
AD,
principal,
principal, yep.
myself,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the only reason I say that specifically is because it adds that AD part to
Mhm.
it, which isn't necessarily spelled out here, because the next step after the employee would be to the principal. Is that right?
Yeah, so we don't specify AD in there. I think you could change that to building administrator, which would then presume that you're moving through that chain. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes, the principal just gets looped in right in the front, because they'll just skip the AD and the principal get involved anyways, but maybe building administrator makes more sense.
By the way, I should say,
Especially at our secondary buildings where you have multiple administrators. that
yeah,
might be
I
intervening.
think when they write these, they write them for 333 districts in the state, and not all districts have multiple layers
Yeah,
of
I just want to make
administration.
sure everyone's kind of covered so that you have that
Mhm.
as a, because your coach may just be an employee as a coach and not a teacher or whatever. So they could be, like, they just want them to be able to know, like, you complain to me, now your next step would be
Yeah.
this
Well,
person.
C is another example because what we'll frequently do is someone will come with a concern, I will refer it, they'll come to me, but I'll actually refer it through Amy and Matt. They're gonna work most directly with the principal on it, and then it also gives us that opportunity to really think objectively about it. Matt and Amy, they may decide, either one of them may decide to support the district, the building principal's decision. That then gives the complainant another avenue for redress with me, so that they're afforded an additional level of review that they wouldn't otherwise get. So we frequently say, nope, it goes there first. This C says superintendent, but from a progressive responsibility standpoint, we we tend to walk it right up the chain. And I would say most people are predisposed to that being a positive for them. So, yeah, I don't think we've had any complaints about that. Not that we haven't had complaints that have made it all the way to my desk, but they've at least gone through each of those steps. Let's see, public hearings, board of directors records. Board meeting minutes. This looks like a lot of stuff, by the way, on board meeting minutes. It's what Kim already does.
Was it actually transcribed into typewritten material for inspection?
Yes, because she goes from handwritten and she puts them in.
I put them in the
electronic.
computer, so they're in board docs, and I can print them out for anybody who wants them.
Annual meeting minutes there. Association membership. Spells this out. Hasn't been policy before. Our board's been a regular member of IASB. Keep in mind, these policies are written by IASB. Board development and training, I'd say the same thing as 216.1, 216.2. We actively participate, whether it's at the annual meeting or in between. Compensation and expenses, 216.3. We haven't had this spelled out before, but this, and you'll see later when we get to employees, that this mirrors the employee process too. So it's just nice to have some of these things in a little bit more detail. I think it answers some questions for you as board members, and it lets people on the outside looking in know how the process works. 217, this was a question that Phil asked at one point in time, and again, this moves, this is directly, you'll see the same language when we get to employees. Talks about gifts and donors. So, like I said, same language that goes to employees going to boards. And it's 3 pages of fun there. Those are our twos.
All right,
We're zipping along. Remember I told you how much fun these were?
yeah.
Ready to do one more?
As long as, because Sean has a 6
Ooh, we can go fast on the 9s.
Okay.
So if you look at 9s on the first page, community relations, school district records, dealing with the press is 902, public participation in the school district, not at board meetings. Public participation in the district is 3. 4 is student roles in community activities. 5 is using our facilities. You see a bunch of G's in there. Those should be familiar to you. And then 906, this is a brand new one, drones. So this is one of their latest additions. 900 essentially says, hey, we've got community relations in place to make sure that we're doing a better job providing community access to the district, whether it's records, getting their input, getting them to participate. Public examination of school district records. We have maybe I should knock on wood. Open records requests. We've kind of gone in cycles on that. Haven't been a lot lately, but this helps people understand how they request public records and where they have access to them. You'll see on 901G1, we actually have a form that we've developed for it that hopefully speeds up the process. Frequently people would ask us for stuff. We'd have to go back and seek clarification from them. If they were hard to get a hold of, that would slow the process down. So now we have people just fill out that form, then there isn't any confusion for exactly what it is that they're looking for. News media relations just really spells out that we think that it's important. We have an open relationship with our partners in media. We do ask them that they channel their requests in that 3rd paragraph through the community relations office. It's best practice. Before you got here and before Kristen was in place, the media would form particular relationships with individual schools, and it was super simple for them to just call the principal up and go there, but that meant that a lot of our schools were never on TV. So Kristen's really good about making sure that every school is represented in kind of a rotational basis, so you don't just see one school It was usually the schools closest to the news media, so when they were coming out from Cedar Rapids, they loved going to Penn, because they could get off the freeway, go there, turn around, go back to Cedar Rapids. That's all well and good, but there are more schools in the district than Penn, so that's worked out
This is the
real.
only section that I really had like a connection with, right? And because we have had discussions in the past, you know, what's appropriate to respond to and what's not appropriate
Sure.
to respond to. And we typically will get an email as a whole board saying,
Yep.
hey, anybody want to weigh in on this, right? And, you know, this very explicitly spells out that it's the responsibility of the board president to respond to inquiries.
Right.
Well, the board president and superintendent, right? And
Yep.
one's the spokesperson for the district and one's the spokesperson for the board. And it kind of says, I should just flat out not answer those emails, which I'm fine with because I don't answer most of them, to be perfectly honest, but I have in the past. So is that actually saying that I'm not allowed to?
It doesn't say that you're not allowed to, but
If somebody needs to,
right. The official voice of the board is the board president. And it's not unlike writing an op-ed in the paper, where at the bottom it says, I'm a member of the board, but my opinion is only that of mine as a board member. So if you're answering an inquiry from the media, it's almost as if then you should read that same disclaimer that you would in an op-ed as part of your interview with the press. So I am a director, I am responding as a director. If you would like the opinion of the board, you need to speak to the board president.
So, like, under this, could the board president reach out to Paul and say, Paul, you have more of an expertise with our attendance zones and the history of that?
Could certainly
As
do
the board
that.
president, they could email us all and say, I'm relinquishing that spokesperson. I'm looking for someone who has more of an expertise. It's just,
Sure, and now one of the things that this, they could do that, technically it'd still be speaking as a director
Okay.
and not on behalf of the board. One of the things that this would encourage us to do by default, which we don't do that often, is to actually say formally, what is the board's position on this issue? So that's one thing that we don't do. I mean, we do it through a vote, right?
right.
But to formally, on things that aren't voted on, for the board to actually say, our position on this is this. We don't do that. I think that adds clarity for the community because they understand here's where the board as an organization as a whole stands on this issue.
a lot of the questions will come at times when we haven't taken board action or something's brought to attention, and we're not gonna, you know,
No.
debate over email to figure out what the board's
Right.
position is before they're gonna throw an article in the paper.
And that,
That's where I tend to just
yep,
take a step back, because I'm like, well, we haven't discussed it.
Mhm.
and you're better
I
off
can
doing
give my
that.
opinion, but I don't know that my opinion is what they're.
I always remind our team that a sense of urgency on their part doesn't create a crisis on my part. So the fact that you've got, you feel that you need to get a story out there is all well and good, but until we have a chance to sit down and talk about it, we're not going to give you any statements on it. News conferences and interviews.
I think it also,
yeah.
sorry.
Go ahead.
It also kind of goes back to the board president role, so I think that one's just saying the board president should be the one that responds, like even if they're not gonna say anything, like
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, because in the role, they're the spokesperson to speak on behalf of the board, spells it out in there.
Right. News conferences and interviews. Lucky you guys. I sit for a lot of those. Anyone who wants to sit in for me. Fairly straightforward there. News releases. Obviously something we push out from our office on a regular basis, try to make sure that we keep the news informed so that they've got official statements from us. Live broadcasting or recording. As you know, we already do that, part of our board meetings. We have in the past, but not recently, had individuals who have brought their recording devices either right up front. I think we haven't had in a while, but we've had news media. Oh yeah, their little recorders like that and placed them up there. School community groups, 9031, booster clubs, PTOs. It specifies that we will work with them. Think about our music auxiliary, some of those folks.
You have to leave it at the time. It's okay.
Yes.
I just figured to start putting my stuff. I figure I got about 15.
So volunteers, that's our 9032. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna ask about this one, the
Yep.
title of this one, since it does also have community resource persons.
Yeah, this is their title.
We don't have necessarily that.
Under which one?
9032.
Community
Just the
resource
phrase of
person.
the resource.
Yeah.
So for us, we really think about this as our volunteers.
Well, yeah, that's why I'm just wondering
Yeah.
if we need that first part.
Not necessarily.
That might, yeah,
Clarify it.
yes.
That works fine for me. All right. 9033, visitors. It's already part of our process. Been to our schools, you know you're up front signing in.
Is there,
Yep.
I know it gets brought up every, well, I was gonna say every November, but pretty much every month of the year we have an election now, so. Is that, talk about it right here?
It's not, so when our schools are used as polling sites, that's a mandate from the state, that schools be open as polling sites. So that law supersedes our board policy. Now, I will tell you that my friendly people on the calendar advisory committee here have drafted future calendars that at least move us away from the November date, and that becomes a non-school day. So at least for the major election, we won't have kids in school in competition with that.
Yeah, because I think it's harder to do for special elections. 'cause
Absolutely.
you just never know.
We don't know when they're gonna happen.
Right, so I think that's a step in the right.
But at least for
direction.
November, that'll become a non-school day. Public conduct on school premises, again, part of our process already. Just make sure that whether they're parents or guests, that they're behaving with what you'd consider to be appropriate public decorum. We probably have more issues with this at sporting events than we do anywhere else, but
Mhm.
this helps us govern behavior there. Matt left, but we have an issue we're dealing with right now.
Let's just do Paul.
Exactly.
Distribution materials in 9035, so think peach chart, right? So this is how we disseminate information, non-curricular materials approved by the building principal, meet their prior plans for distribution. You know, instead of stuffing backpacks now, we post them on peach jar. They go directly to age-appropriate parents. I don't know if you're on there, but I get every, oh, I could get you connected with that.
That's okay.
I know you're not a parent anymore.
No.
I only get to high school things now.
I'm trying to see if it talks in here. There was one, I think it was like ice cream social night or something. Flyers were getting stuck on windshields in the parking lot, and
We have worked with
Not sure about that.
organizations about whether or not our parking lots are actually public premises or not. Technically, they're not. The sidewalk, yes. Our parking lot, no. But unfortunately, we usually find out after the fact. People presume that because it's a school, that the parking lot is a public parking lot. And there's actually an official definition for what a public parking lot is, and a school is not a public parking lot. So public property, not a public parking lot.
So the language on here says school premises, does that include parking lots then?
Yes, yep. Distribution of materials, you can see hopefully that's pretty common sense, already part of our process. Make sure that we don't have to have things on the district property that are going to be a clear disruption to kids in their educational process. Distribution materials, 9035G1, that is our process. So that is what we go through in terms of deciding what goes where. Develop in conjunction with our friends on our legal counsel. Very, very specific. 9035G2, some of you may remember we had a specific incident at one of our high schools, so that's the precipitating factor for our campaign signs on district property.
But that also pertains to, say, somebody having a campaign sign in the parking lot of this building.
That would be correct?
Okay.
Yep.
And this also covers, you can have on yours, you can announce like, there's a bond vote on the, whatever, as long
Right.
as you don't advocate for one.
Right. Transporting students in private vehicles, which I prefer to ban in general, but since there are occasions when it has to happen, we have specific regulations for that. We had these in place already. Advertising and promotion. So this has come up as an issue. You may have dealt with everything from, we can find our logos at Walmart to other things like that. So students, district name, buildings, etc., as long as, if you're for-profit, as long as it's got board approval. If it doesn't, then no. If you're a nonprofit, then you have prior approval, that could come from me. So
Just, okay, so if you're a for-profit and you buy advertising space, I guess is the best way to say it, on the building or somewhere in the building that has to be approved by us?
if you're buying, so like for instance, if you're buying space on the billboard at City High, that has to have approval from the district in order to buy that. If you are using our logo off the premises, then the board has to approve that. So,
There should be a contract basis to it, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing, so there's an exchange of
and then
dollars.
you,
so there should be-
right, then you have to approve that through the contract approval process.
Just our logo, this one.
Yes. Yeah, which, that's why when I find all of our school logos all over the place at Walmart, I discover that they're actually in the public domain.
Well, yeah, there's a way to regulate that, but
You have to go through the entire trademark application process for each individual logo. Yeah, wow.
make some money out of it.
Yep. The next few all pertain to use of district facilities, and you can see E1 takes you out to our form. R1 is our restrictions for it, and R2 is our schedule of costs for it. These are all part of our current process.
Okay, those
Yep.
are not bad.
And then you can see spelled out in more detail in 9051G1. So that's what's a nonprofit school partner. If you flip over, what's a nonprofit group, what's a for-profit group, what's another governmental agency. Over time, we've gotten more and more and more detailed with this as we've tried to refine that and make sure that people know where they live. G2, because we have lots of people who are very interested in working with our kids in our facilities. These are the rules for clubs and how they use our district facilities. Partially, these were put in play to ensure that there's some fair treatment for each of those clubs out there, and that certain clubs aren't favored over others, and that there's a reasonable process in place for reserving space. .9052 says no tobacco, no nicotine on premises. By the way, yes, they can go out to the sidewalk,
But not the parking lot.
not the parking lot.
And do we have one about alcohol use? So I could come, I mean,
We don't have one about alcohol use. It's in the employee section. You can't do that.
right, but for public.
General public?
I
So,
think there's,
I think the
State
public,
laws
I was gonna
in
say, I think the
regards to
public intox
having
rules
alcohol,
might
yeah.
might provide us cover for that.
intox rules.
Yeah.
I don't think they're
Cause like you don't have a
open containers
weapons.
or anything.
Do we have weapons one for adults? I mean, obviously, like we talked about.
Yeah,
student
no, because
code of conduct.
there's a state law on weapons.
Right, so that's what
Yeah.
I'm thinking, what
I-
would that
I
parallel
think-
alcohol then?
I think like the
There's
public
state
consumption
law.
alcohol, yeah, I think those things all over supersede us.
Yeah, 'cause you couldn't have an open container, you couldn't
Yep.
be intoxicated in public. both
Right.
those
Can't walk down the
are
street carrying an open
Yeah.
beer.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
And then the last one is the drones one.
Mhm.
Yep. Go back.
Did I just miss that? Was smoking specifically called out, did you say?
What?
Huh?
Or did you just say that? Smoking.
No, I said alcohol.
By the way, I'll tell you
On the
that,
sidewalk.
Oh, well,
yeah,
he said sidewalk, and I was like, but not parking lot, because we were talking about how parking lot is not public.
it's not uncommon for us to have people, in particular at athletic events, that go smoke in the parking lot.
Mhm.
Right.
So I
So,
unfortunately frequently have to ask that they go to the sidewalk.
so the reason I say you bring up smoking,
Yes.
so is that in here?
So it says tobacco and nicotine, and so that includes
Cigarettes.
I'm just
cigarettes,
making-
chew, snuff, vaping.
Vaping, that's
Yeah,
what I'm saying.
because it's a tobacco
But it talks
product.
about anything that
Yep.
resembles.
Yep, when vaping became a big deal, we asked local law enforcement, they said tobacco includes vaping. So you'll find if you go to the high schools that they have all kinds of stuff confiscated there, which I didn't even know were actual distribution things for that. And then the last one is drones. So this allows us to ensure that, and this, if you think about it, you know, why do you need this? Well, the big one is football games. I asked, I said, why, what's the big deal? And other larger public gatherings, your marching band, things like that. But it allows us then to control anyone flying over our vertical column of airspace so that they're not putting kids in danger.
I know there was a drone at the first Liberty football game, I remember that, but I think it was part of the.
It was approved, yep, yep. The AD and the principal up there said yes to it. Took some great pictures. And we've used them actually, if you look at some of our construction photos, when you're out on the website looking at the little progress updates like on Southeast, that's an approved drone that's up there flying.
So if someone on Saturday decided they wanted to take pictures of City High using a drone, technically they would be in violation.
Technically, they would be in violation of that. And you think about it like this, they lose control of their drone, it flies through the window, you know, then what? Who's responsible for that?
Lands on a person.
There's an experience there.
I personally don't, but my place of employment does.
Oh, all right. So there's your 1s, 2s, and 9s.
Sounds good. There was one other item on it, and then my computer's going wonky, I
Oh.
can't get to it.
Internal compliance
There we
or
go.
something.
It
I'm not
didn't
sure
have
what that meant.
details on it.
And I believe that was a request from, we think, Director Hemingway, but we're not sure. But I guess my thought on it is that from an internal compliance process, that's part of what our policies do for us, is they create the compliance mechanisms that are inside there and the accountability mechanisms. So I think we've got that covered.
Great, and then the next PNG meeting,
Is March,
what?
I can't see my calendar.
Do we, the first Tuesday?
Yeah, it's
So
March
March 5th?
3rd, 5th, sorry, thanks. And we plan to have 7s and 8s for you,
Okay,
so it's only 2.
yep.
And we'll be done with weather?
Curse you.
Yes, exactly.
On that bad note. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn. Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, aye.